Welcome to Face to Face, connecting theater makers to the public, a program from the Legacy Theater and socialdistancetheater.org. Welcome to another episode of Face to Face. I am delighted to be here today with Erik Liberman. He is not only a Broadway actor, a TV actor, an author, and the founder of Bridge to Broadway. He's a director and an educator, and he brings all of these parts of himself and more into each of the sessions that we have where we get to interview. He interviews artists in the industry that are what I would have considered completely unreachable, and makes them accessible at a very affordable rate at this time. And it's been an absolute joy and eye-opening, and I've been delighted to get to know Erik through this, and now even more today as he's our guest on Face to Face. So welcome, Erik.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. I think we're all assuming mantles that we never expected to. In response to COVID-19. I think it's an opportunity to grow ourselves larger and taller and open our eyes to our global citizenship. And, the truth is we're all actors, authors, directors, and educators, whether we accept responsibility for it or not. And the way that comes through is our choices, right? So we direct situations in our lives. We can set intentions in the rooms we walk into before we enter them. We can journal and write our vision for ourselves and our lives. And ultimately, we're the actor in the center. And some of us, exist in the margins and as extras in the narrative of our lives. And I think it's incumbent on us to scooch ourselves to the middle, not as the center of the universe, but at least accepting responsibility for the narration that we want to promulgate in the world.
Well, in your aha moments in life that have led you to be this amazing gentleman that you are today, you are opening yourself up as mentor to the rest of us and to the world at large through this amazing program, which we'll get to. But first, I want to know how it all began. How did you first discover that you were an artist, that you were a performer, and that you were meant for the stage?
Oh gosh, I was born knowing that. I have a unique memory of my birth, actually, which sounds very strange to say, but I remember coming here and having a sense of purpose very much embedded in me. Mm-hmm. It was only a question of unpacking it through time. And I developed as an artist in response to my circumstances, which were distressing to me as a child. So I felt somehow intrinsically, I knew that singing and that acting and even impersonation, which was a way for me to understand people by becoming them, could distract from some of the trauma going on around me, and also could utilize who I was as a channel or a vessel. So we toy with these things, right? We all play. Yeah, we play roles as children. But it wasn't until I was about 6 years old, I typed a letter to the producers of a television show I was interested in, and they put me on it as a regular. And I was reading comics to kids like myself, but playing the characters. And then I joined a children's theater, and a wonderful mentor named Corky Dozier down in Miami, Florida at the Coconut Grove Children's Theater. She just had this amazing, multicultural mecca of art making for youth in Coconut Grove. And I spent my Saturdays not playing soccer or baseball like my friends because I didn't really have a penchant for those things. I started gathering skills and experiences, being with audiences and learning to collaborate. And she implanted us in community and gave us a very direct sense that art was about giving back. Mm. And that led to television and commercials and High School for the Arts. And I think the seminal moments when I was younger centered on performers and performances that made me feel less alone in the world, because I always had a sense that I was on the outside looking in. And when I saw certain actors telling certain stories, I said, oh my gosh, I'm not. And it wasn't until many, many years later I think the beginning of our lives are spent unraveling some of the blueprints that may not serve us, building roads moving forward. But once we do, we really get the privilege of realizing that we're here to give back. So then when students and audience members would come up to me and say, they say something you did or said impacted me, I say something that I had the good sense to allow to come through me impacted them. It was the bravery in stepping to the precipice to allow myself to be replaced by something larger so that they could be reached how they needed to be reached that day. So, pardon, it's in essence a circle that keeps widening and spinning and giving back, and none of us own it. You know, it's just really about showing up for the service of it all.
And how amazing that a 6-year-old you took it upon himself to write a producer to get your first gig. I mean, that's pretty exceptional, above and beyond the talent and, you know, the given gift that you had.
I always loved writing, and I always believed in creating opportunity. I mean, my mother was very encouraging of that, but people are people, you know, everybody wants to be seen. And I like seeing people, and I like being seen, because in the seeing is the recognition that we are the same.
So did
you know, if you isolate, yeah.
I'm sorry, please.
No, all I was saying, there's that slight delay, the magic of Zoom.
Yeah.
If you just isolate on the pupils or the corneas of any sentient being, an animal, human, just iris in on the cornea and the pupil. You don't have a gender identity, you don't have a skin color, you don't have a sexual orientation, you don't have a disability, you don't have whatever it is. You're a spirit, you're a soul. You know, you happen to have some body casing of one kind or another. But seeing people and letting ourselves be seen reveals that to us, and that's what's so precious in the act of communication.
And I feel like perhaps some people who may not have a strong prior understanding or knowledge of that during this time with the pandemic are really gaining that longing, that sense for connection, and that very essence in the way that you're talking about.
Well, we are connected. You know, it's just about accepting it. It's about dropping the conditioning that has convinced us that because this person doesn't identify with a religious text, or this person looks like that, that somehow we're distinct. And we are all unique iterations of universal creativity. But that's the beauty. You know, that's what keeps us in wonder, or is supposed to, is the fact that you can just take a walk, hopefully if you're somewhere that's green, as the song goes, and there's dew on a leaf that's catching light in a way that it never will before. And there's a bird that's not your concept of a bird, it's an actual individual creature which contains the matrix of all that is. How a seed becomes a tree. How amazing that I can take a zucchini seed, plant it, and then this very unique thing that comes up is not a carrot, and it's not a squash. And we, I would venture to say, are the only species that turn side to side and say, well, I don't look like that squash and I don't act like that carrot, so there must be something wrong with me. Or there must be something wrong with them. Instead of, wow, we've got a field of flowers here. A begonia is not like a petunia, which is not like a daffodil or a rose or a gardenia. And they're all gifts. And art and love and nature, to me, are the underpinnings of this recognition, this remembrance, because they all force us to bow beneath the magic and awe of life and the variety of it.
How have these this knowledge of the miracles around you supported and sustained you as you began to go into a very well, what's a very competitive and can be a very scary world of professional acting. Did you move? Then you were from Florida in the
Yeah.
beginning, and then did you move to to New York City straight from there, or what was your path?
Well, we moved a bit when I was growing up, and then my father actually left Florida, where we had relanded, and he went to Colorado and then Hawaii. So I got to spend time in those places, which was wonderful. And then when I was 18, I packed up and went to New York, and then I went to back to Colorado for a minute, and then to LA, and then back to New York, and then back to LA. Now it's really back and forth, but competition is really a concept born of fear that we're not enough. And also, I don't think when we really know ourselves, there's any competition with anybody. Why use anyone as an excuse to be less than your shining self? People can. I had a dance teacher, Cinderella Che, who used to say, there is no competition, there's only a commitment to yourself. And that really stuck with me because I would dance and I'd say, who's that weirdo? I would almost avoid looking at myself in the mirror because I couldn't stand how differently my body was constructed than the people around me. And then I realized, if you've got one foot on the brake, which is self-doubt and self-deprivation, and one foot on the gas, which is ambition, you're not going anywhere.
That's a good way.
You're messing with your vehicle, but it's all got to be born of love.
Mm-hmm.
So people are so afraid of self-love, right? Because they think it's selfish, but no, we really aren't, in my opinion, of use to anyone unless we love this vessel first, because that emanates, self-esteem emanates, that's a teacher. And it also holds space for other people to emerge. I don't believe if we're not clothed in our right mind that we truly have something full to offer others.
Now, was it Hal Prince that gave you your first kind of real break, if you want to call it that?
Yeah, Hal was my hero. He was a judge of the Lotte Lenya competition for singers that the Kurt Weill Foundation puts up. I highly recommend it. And my singing teacher, Joan Lader, bless her, said, I think you could do that. So I spent 6 months turning myself into the person who could do that because I just kept envisioning meeting Hal. And sure enough, at the finals in Rochester, New York, he walked down the aisle, never forget it, and he said, I think you're terrific. You can do anything. And I felt like I'd been, dubbed a knight, baptized, whatever it was. He flew back to New York shortly thereafter for the 5,000th performance of Phantom or something like that. But eventually, I was one of the winners of that. And he was casting Love Music, which was his last truly original musical on Broadway. There was Prince of Broadway, which was an amalgamation, but Love Music was like, different than a career retrospective. And I was too young on paper to be part of that company, but I really aged myself consciously through gravitas and other means, to enter as a peer of the realm. And that actually, even though I'd worked in Equity Waiver Theater and in Equity Productions as a EMC point member, that was the show that gave me my equity card. Working with Donna Murphy and Michael Cervers and Pat Birch and Alfred Uria. I mean, it was Jonathan Tunick. I don't even know what to say about that.
Wow.
It was, and it was huge for two reasons, actually. One, I mean, very heady to run into people you've looked up to your whole life backstage. Legends would come to see Hal's shows, but also the show wasn't a success. So to witness all this talent gather and fight and do their best and still have something that wasn't critically lauded. I mean, I think USA Today said it was the best musical of the year, but they were pretty alone in that. It got 12 Drama Desk nominations, but I think Donna won and tied with someone, maybe Audra McDonald. I can't remember who she tied with that year, but In other words, it was just like even legends are human beings. And from there, Hal became kind of a backbone for a lot of my jobs, and certainly a friend and a consigliere, and the band's visit, which was a project that I believe he optioned. He developed with me in mind with this role, and with he said "Answer Me" is Erik's song. It was written for Erik, and
No idea. Isn't that
yeah,
something?
so that was really the last
Wow.
great. And he also gave me my first directing job. Hal recommended that I direct the all-star 50th anniversary celebration of Fiddler on the Roof at New York City's Town Hall. So here I was, just saying yes. And that's because someone said yes to Hal. And now, I meet students who say, "Oh, you said yes to me." And I may not even remember that, but it's so part of the ethos of what Hal gave me.
Can you talk to us a bit about that directing experience? So now we know a bit about the acting, and so this was your foray into directing. What was
Yeah.
that like for you?
What was the last question?
Well, just what was it like for you? Just
Oh, what was it like? Well, it was busy. It was a really full house because we had the stars of the film. Topol flew in from Israel to do it, and we had stars of the original Broadway production, the major revivals, and then some guest stars. What was particularly special to me because two artists I greatly admire joined the company. Chita Rivera, who was the reason I wanted to go into musical theater. I got to direct her. And Joshua Bell, the great violinist, who played the introduction on violin to the movie Fiddler on the Roof. So I love actors so much. I feel like I see into the heart of actors, and that wasn't per se an opportunity I would have directing Chekhov, but to shape a picture. There's great pleasure in it. And there's great pleasure in meeting the young person inside actors, even when they're in their 70s and 80s and 90s, because we all still show up at that sandbox to play. And directing is, it's funny. I think you realize when you're on enough sets or in enough rehearsal rooms, if your ideas are starting, no, that could be over there, and that could be, you have to take that. You have to take that into its own space and try it. And rest her beloved spirit, Lynn Cohen, who was a great, great New York theater and TV and film actress, and my spiritual auntie, I call her. She played Magda on Sex and the City and was Golda Meir in Munich. She would allow me, she and her beautiful husband Ronnie, to come over and direct them and just pick scenes. And I remember picking an Inge short play and just gathering friends and directing in the living room and feeling what it was to do that. So I'm certain there'll be more of that.
And you must do that quite a bit with your acting teaching.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I've always viewed acting as healing work, right? Because if we're really doing it, again, we're allowing ourselves to be replaced by something quite fulfilling. And it can touch people in places that they haven't been reached in a while, if ever. And my life is very spiritual, but not based in any dogma. It's just rather organic. And believe it or not, I had a near-death experience when I was 17 years old. And so when I came through that, I learned a lot of things. Really, that death is not the thing to be feared. If anything's to be feared, and I put that in quotes, it's not living. It's not designing a day that matches the map of your life as you wish to live it. Not forgiving, not apologizing, not saying thanks, not sharing your love. I mean, those are the deprivations that equal death while embodied. So when I'm working with actors, I see them. I feel I see their spirit. When I'm working with anybody, that's what I'm looking at. Even if they're acting egregiously out in one way or another, I'm trying to locate within them the youngest person before they were harmed. inside, who might even still believe in something miraculous. So sounds very woo-woo, but I think what actors feed back to me a lot when I coach them or teach them or direct them is that you wouldn't let me get away with allowing my damage to be the badge that I hide behind. In other words, my request is that the damage enter the color palette of jewels that they can draw from to create as an act of service so others can be set free by the secrets they are daring to reveal. So that in that way, to bring it full circle, I look at acting work and working with actors as healing. There's an actor I'm coaching right now who on paper is great, has a huge social media following, but the epidemic is the desire to be visible but not seen, right? So I just want everyone to know that I'm out there, but there's not a lot going in here that I'm giving space and credence for and permission for others to grow comfortable within themselves. Hope that answered it.
I would say you should write a book, but you beat me to it. So talk to me a bit about the literature that you have authored.
Oh, sure. It sounds so lofty when you say it that way. Basically, my father, among other things, is an author, and he's written a lot about his own work as in the healing realms. He was an eye doctor, and his vision cleared in a meditation. So he's also had a rather unorthodox path. And I always looked at his books, gave him whatever input I could if he asked for it. And then his third book, he asked if he could write it with me. And that was is called Wisdom from an Empty Mind, which is a very Zen koan-like title. And I'm very proud of that book because it was written in 2001. I think it still stands. And Eckhart Tolle and Ram Dass and Louise Hay, who are teachers I've loved, endorsed the book. And I tend to just share it with people as a gift because it's not the kind of thing you have to read cover to cover. It's like one-page essays and accompanying quotes. And then my father wrote his fourth book, which is called Luminous Life, How the Science of Light Unlocks the Art of Living. And that's all about the relationship between light, vision, and consciousness. I helped him editorially with that. My sister really brought it into the form it was published in. But since then, it's a great book. I've written a pilot, and I have been working on a book which is now, looks like it's going to have a compendium piece, which is a series or a documentary. And that's important for me. As I share a lot on the Bridge to Broadway sessions, we can become really sharp tools in other people's tool belts, and we can build wonderful castles for others, and then find ourselves struggling to pay the rent. So I'm a huge proponent of widen your tool belt, write, produce, direct. The mythology, and it's particularly endemic to those indoctrinated in the way of thinking in the United States, is that if I'm not perfect at it, or if I don't think I'm born with the gift, I'm just not going to approach it. But that's magical thinking. It's about practicing. The great news about writing is that the great news about art is that no one's going to beg you to do it. So if it's not bringing you pleasure, don't do it. Find something that does. You'll be of better service there. But as a writer, it's you in romance with your desk and your paper, which can be in the woods or anywhere you want. You don't need the audience. And maybe when someone reads it, it's the 10th or 12th or 50th draft. So nobody has to see it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It will tell you what it wants to become. And we owe that to ourselves as actors, I think, is non-perfectionism, but excellence. And the difference is excellence is about showing up for the gifts you've been given, even if they just arrive in a whisper and say, you ought to try me out. We owe it to ourselves because I happen to believe that whispers are really someone calling to us, saying, I need your voice to feel more alive and less alone. Who are we to deny that? So show up at the desk, whatever the desk may mean or be for you.
Wow. Wow. So your pilot. So now this gets us into the on-camera work that you've done. Can you back up a little bit and tell us so we know as a youth you were in front of the camera,
Yeah.
and then you go and you're on Broadway and you have these wonderful successes. Um, is there a preference or a path, or are you where does camera work lie in your?
Well, my interest in it has just grown. First of all, obviously, movie and television performances can reach wider audiences than theater can, even streaming theater. Even though the impact of theater is more visceral and immediate, we can only deliver it in packets of, a couple thousand at a time if we're lucky enough to be in a stage that, an audience rather, on a stage before an audience that holds a few thousand people. But television and film, I mean, we have the gift of the close-up, right? So there's something called Parasocial Interaction, which was first written about in 1956, which describes the phenomenon of human beings assuming that the person they see on their screen is their friend. Because there's something in the limbic brain that cannot distinguish an actual person with a person we agree to enter the realm of story with. There's something really powerful about the visual domain and the orchestration of it that is not, it's possible to degrees on stage, but not in the way it's possible on screen. I'm really interested in that. I'm interested in how the framing of shots becomes as much a character as the characters we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in the difference between the male gaze, which I only learned about when I first worked with Jill Soloway on Transparent, and the non-male gaze that we don't even realize. It's like the fish saying, what is this water stuff you keep talking about? How much media and representation is filtered through us through a kind of photography that even informs us the regard with which we're supposed to consider something in our field of awareness. So I love Broadway, and it takes your life. It takes your time, gives you life, but it takes it. It takes physical strength. And so I'm looking, since I came to Los Angeles to work on Transparent and a few other shows, how can I leverage my time most effectively and my messaging? So creating the pilot was something that people said I should do for many years because there's some interesting stories that I've experienced. And it's amazing to explore it through the lens of what needs to be told, who needs to be seen, what's got to be heard. And it's just again, it's about accepting a responsibility for our time here, the privilege of our time here, the privilege of even having the ability to have a desk and write and time to do it. So yeah, I see myself behind a camera and calling shots, and then also still being in the shots, maybe not directing myself, but it's important to know what everybody on a set does. And we can get so myopic, even in theater. We don't know what the friends and the flies are doing, and we really don't know, what the sound designer is doing unless we ask, unless we grow curious. And that's like, aren't we professionally curious? Isn't that the prescription for this line of work?
Yeah.
I hope so.
I'm so thrilled that somebody with your degree of awareness and your depth is writing a pilot. I often think about how much control over the universal brain writers have, especially those that reach for TV and film. And it's so refreshing to know that there's going to be literature out there from people like you.
Thank you. It's not control, though. I mean, I don't view it as control. It's allowing, because I'm a big fan of meditation. I recommend it for everyone. But meditation to me is a listening practice. They say prayer is an asking or talking, and meditation is listening. So the universe, muse, creator, creation, whatever you want to call it, it's always talking to us. It's always whispering to us. It's always giving us a sign. We make it a habit to ignore most of it most of the time and then wonder why we get into trouble because we didn't heed the whisper 10 paces ago. And there's no shame in that.
Are there any ways that you can let our audience members know how to find you in regards to, if they want to see a piece of work that you've been in, that's episodic or on a particular series, and they kind of want to search around and become a fan if they aren't already? What's some of your hit list that you would send them to?
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, I have a website. I think that's a hub because what I gathered there was, scenes from Transparent or Vinyl, which was really fun to work on, the Mick Jagger, Martin Scorsese series. And then there are moth stories there where these are original stories I've written and shared on stages, and then some crazy comedy, really crazy comedy that I've done, and some fun commercials and also Bridge to Broadway. I mean, if you want to get a sense for what matters to me, join us on Bridge to Broadway online because we have daily or near daily conversations with trailblazers, way showers, I'll call them. And these dialogues to me are as important and as informative as showing up on a stage, because if we don't know why we're showing up on stage, the work is less deep than it actually could be. And since it's a privilege to stand on a stage and many may never get a chance to do that, I think it behooves us to really enrich and widen our perspective. So in providing a space for these dialogues, that's my contribution to the non-pandemic, which is the creative spirit that's rising from the perceived limitations we're living in right now.
Will you give us those two websites, please?
Oh, sure. My own website. My name is spelled in a unique way. It's Erik with a K, Erik, and the last name Liberman, which is Lib as in boy, Erman. So it's erikliberman.org as in org. And then Bridge to Broadway is Bridge to Broadway, spelled out the word to, online, bridgetobroadwayonline.com. And you can find our classes there. You can find our class pass, which enables you to take unlimited classes a month per calendar month. You get some free coachings, you get some bonus classes. We offer school discounts, we offer payment plans. Pretty much we just want people to be there because the gift is the showing up. And from what I'm hearing, it's changing a lot of lives. I'm getting a lot of letters and beautiful affirmations, but the truth is there was no choice in the matter. I could feel the inclement depression coming upon students I'd worked with who felt they had nowhere to exist, and also friends who are accustomed to sharing 8 times a week saying, what do I do with this information? So I don't know, the term Bridge to Broadway came to me in the shower, as certain things do. And I was like, yeah, that's actually what this is. It's a place for us to meet in dialogue, and a portion of our proceeds benefit the Actors Fund. So we're trying to just keep everyone in working order with a place to show up and get dressed and comb themselves. And
Well, as a student of it, I cannot say enough about it. It's the most unusual experience in the most wonderful way. You will be blown away. You get to be face to face with these, as you say, trailblazers, and then also Erik, who is, as you already know now by seeing this interview, such an exceptional human being in every single way. And so the dialogue that you witness between him and his guest or guests as they're coming up is so mind-blowing. You learn so much more than you would anticipate about just the craft of acting or theater making. It's just, I can't say enough about it. And the fact that it's affordable and that you can pick and choose your classes as works around your schedule, and that these artists are available to do it for these intimate groups, it's just amazing. So
well, I feel like it's important to take advantage of the availability. There's just a little more availability right now on all of our schedules. You know, we have no places to run, so we might as well come together with ourselves and hold space for that. And, you know, it's all going to change in a month or a few weeks, but at least we'll have had this intimate exchange of ideas. And, you know, it's funny, you referred to yourself as a student, which is very sweet, but I think of everyone just as a participant or colleague, because I don't want people to feel that they're not a member of this community. I want them to recognize they are, and stop thinking about the future. Start asking yourself, how can I inculcate that future right now? Become the magnet, become the maker, so that it's not something we dream is just endowed unto us, bestowed unto us. It's, you know, you want to be a director, so arrange a Zoom play reading. You want to connect with someone who came on the call, you write them a letter. So it's just opening doors. None of us are going to be here forever, but what will last is whether we made things better for the next in line, because then they'll be inspired to do that for others. That's my wish.
Well, thank you, Erik. You are an inspiration and beyond. And thank you for doing this interview.
Of course. Thank you for asking.
I'm so excited for all the people that will watch this and then come along for the ride. Thanks, Erik.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for joining us on Face to Face. We would like to thank our sponsors, Oak Tree Development and the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, and Brad Ross for the themed music. You can follow us on legacytheaterct.org.